What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 1 of Legends of Bass. In this series, I'm aiming to sort of do a case study into some of the different bassists out there that have influenced me. A lot of my techniques I've developed through listening to these different bassists. And what I want to do is show some of their most creative lines, some that might be a little less known, and really sort of dig into some different techniques and maybe even a little bit of theory about how they put these together. Who greater to start with than Flea of the Red Hot Chili Peppers? I spent a lot of time learning his bass lines all throughout high school and college. I learned how to play slap bass from covering Chili Peppers. Definitely an influential player to myself as well as many others. So without further ado, let's get down to it. So the first album I want to talk about is Mother's Milk, taking us all the way back to 1989, the first album with the classic Chili Peppers lineup of Frusciante, Flea, Kiedis, and Chad Smith at the drum kit. This one's a real funky album, but it began their sort of transition into some more pop-ish songs, if you will, if you want to call any of their songs really pop. But anyway, great one to start off with is the song Stone Cold Bush. It's got a real fast, frantic bass line, a lot of 16th notes in there, going real quick, and even a great couple little bass solos in there. So let's check that one out.
Hey, street, got nothing to show except the skirt in your ass. When you're living on the streets, gotta let it roll. Get on with what you got. Everybody knows that it's alright. You got no sins to tell. When we smoke that rock and suck that cock, you know it hurts away.
So as you can see from that example, one of Flea's classic little bass solos, some great slap action in that, real solid tight end 16th notes on the verse. Just really a great tune. Moving on, we're going to jump ahead a couple years to 1991, the classic album Blood Sugar Sex Magic, with Give It Away, Suck My Kiss, Under the Bridge, classic album. But I wanted to talk about some of the more funky bass lines on it. Of course, this is Legends of Bass. So the first one I want to talk a little bit about is If You Have to Ask. Great, solid, classic bass playing on the verse. Simple, just sort of a few notes, nothing too fancy. And then when the chorus comes in, he's sort of all over the fretboard. Quick movements, a lot of slides, a lot of pull-offs. Let's check that one out.
I wanna be gangster, thinking he's a wild guy, robbing at the bank, he's a sock him in the eye guy. Tank head, Mr. Bonnie and Clyde guy, look him in the eye, he's not my kind of guy. Never wanna be confusion, proof of pudding, sweet, but too early fun. Orange-eyed girl with the backslide blue said, yo, homie, who you talking to? Backed up, paddy wagon, macking on a cat's ass, one uppercut to the cold upper middle class. Born a storm on boredom's face, add little lust to the funky ass bass. Most in the race just lose their grace. The blackest hole in all of space. Crooked as a hook and I'll suck my thumb. Anybody wanna come get some? You'll never know. Bit tough to go. You'll never know. Bit tough to go. Wow, wow, wow.
So as you can see there, that's a real dynamic bass line. Again, real classic bass player playing during the verse. Then he really opens it up on the chorus, and then back to that sort of solid low-end bass playing when the verse comes back in. Interesting that it's drop D tuning as well, so you're really getting that low end on the verses. Wanted to mention one other song on Blood Sugar Sex Magic, and that is Mellowship, Slinky in B major. This is another great tune. You know, it's not necessarily a hit by any measure of the word, but some real solid bass playing in there. It starts off with a real tight syncopated bass line that's sort of going along with the guitar and the drums when the song opens up, and then you just come into this sort of repeating bass line that keeps, he more or less plays the same thing throughout the verse and then even to the next part of the song before the chorus, but it really holds everything down, and it lets Frusciante open up a little bit more with the riffs that he's playing, and it goes really well. It's really in the pocket against Chad's drumming. Another great line. Let's check it out. Okay, we're going to jump ahead a few more years here to the classic Californication, 1999. Chili Peppers were just really climbing up the charts with Californication. You had Scar Tissue, you had Other Side, you had Californication, of course. Great album, critically acclaimed. Who doesn't love that album? But again, I'm going to focus on some of the more bass-centric songs. The first one I want to talk about is Around the World. Love this bass line. It was one of the first things I learned once I learned to play with my fingers instead of a pick. You got the distorted intro with the heavy overdriven bass. Then you go into that real funky bass line on the verses, a melodic chorus, and just even a great outro. So let's take a look at the intro, some of the verse, and the chorus as well from Around the World. Whew, that is one crazy bass line. Boy, do I love it. Moving on a little bit. Also, a couple other songs from Californication I wanted to mention. One is Easily. Easily one of the best bass lines on the album. What I think's great about this song is the fact that Flea really sort of works around the chords when he plays his bass line. During the verses, he's really hanging on to each chord that Frusciante's playing, because he's sort of just playing a simple strum throughout most of the song. But a great example of this is during the chorus, when he sort of walks up and down the bar chords. He goes root, fifth, up to the octave, to the third, and then walks back down. Let's take a look at that. One last quickie from Californication, and how can we not mention it, is Right on Time. Great little slap tune, great use of the ghost notes in there. He's really doing a quick, not too complex, but quick sort of ghost note slap line on the verses. And then the ever famous chorus where he's doing those disco sort of octaves at breakneck speed. It's something I use for warm-ups before I play with my band live. It's just a great thing to get the blood running, and it's a great thing to really practice your precision. Anyway, here it is, a clip from Right on Time. All right, let's talk a little bit about By the Way. Great record, a departure from really everything that came before it. It was a very melodic record, sort of not too much distortion. It was sort of more about melodies and harmonies. Some people weren't really as much into that sort of thing. I thought it was an excellent album. Of course, I'm biased, as you could tell. I'm a huge Chili Peppers fanboy. But anyway, with regards to bass, let's talk about the song, By the Way. Really mix of techniques going on here, a little bit of everything. He opens up with a nice harmonized, slow, simple part with Frusciante, and then right away it breaks off into that just wild drop D bass line, and it's an interesting technique. You'll see it in the clip in a second, but he keeps going down to the open D note, and you'll see it in the clip that it's like D, D, does the riff, back down to D, hits the high note, D again. It's something that takes a little bit of practice to understand, but it's one of his best bass lines, and then you come in with that melodic chorus. Really just a classic piece.
Standing in line to see the show tonight, and there's a light on, heavy glow. By the way, I tried to say I'd be there, waiting for Danny the girl is singing songs to me.
This next one's actually an interesting one. It's actually the song This Is the Place. It's the next track on By the Way. And I chose it because it's really somewhat of an outlier as far as Flea's bass playing goes. For one, he plays the song in the studio and even a few times live from what I've seen with a pick, which is really unheard of for Flea. He's practically only ever played with his fingers with regards to recordings and live performances. So it's interesting to hear a song played with a pick from him. The other reason is because this is a very sort of simple bass line that just loops throughout the entire song. The intro, the verse, the chorus, with the exception of the very short bridge in the middle of the song, he plays the exact same bass line looping over and over again throughout the whole song. And what I think is interesting about that is, while other parts of the song can change, the drum beat, the guitar licks, the melodies, because of the key of the song, he's able to keep playing that same melody throughout the whole song, and it really clicks when he switches into the chorus and you get sort of a different feel, even though he's playing the same bass line. So here's a little taste of that.
But everything gets slow. Can I get some Basslines? Step into a modern scene. Take a chance on that which seemed to be the making of a dream. I don't wanna do it like my daddy did. I don't wanna give it to my baby's kid. This is my calling. I said, darling, shocking, appalling. All I can do to you, hammers are rolling. I said, darling, shocking, appalling. All I can do to you.
So, moving on to 2006, the Chili Peppers released their epic double album, Stadium Arcadium. Great album, lots of hits. They won a whole bunch of Grammys for this album. And with so many choices on there and so many great bass lines, it was really hard to narrow it down. So I kind of just picked some of my personal favorites, the first of which is Charlie. Charlie's a great bass line. It's got this cool little sort of ghost note, real funky thing going on in the verses, with John actually playing in a different time signature over it, so it really brings this whole funky offbeat feel. And then when we get to the chorus, we see something that Flea has really done throughout his career, but it's sort of de-emphasized, is he does a lot of chords and double stops, roots and thirds. Sometimes he'll do inverted things, but in this song in particular, on the chorus, rather than playing a straight bass line, he actually plays the major and minor chords of the chorus as a root and third double stop with thumb and pinky, or however you want to play it, I guess is fine. But let's take a look at that and see some of the variety in that bass line.
All the boys stitching time. Get yours, got mine. In a minute, I'll be there. Sit tight, get square. You could do it if the different roll. Slide back, trombone. Anybody got a different tone? That's right. Oh no. When I pick up on that smell, pick it up and run like hell. Little woman said, Miss Son, better get up on your run. So much more than Charlie's waking to my core, and Charlie's shaking. Tell my story. Charlie's making me smile. Oh, now.
Tell Me Baby was a big hit single on this album. Really popular, danceable, fun, great slap bass line. Simple, but nonetheless just pulverizing to the ear. He's constantly coming down on those double and triple taps, really just sort of hammering it down and just keeping the song marching along. And then we get up to the chorus, and he comes in with this great slap bass line where he's following the chords, So it still feels very melodic. It doesn't feel too overly funky or overly aggressive. It works very nicely. He's doing a nice octave as they move through the chords in the chorus. So with that mixture of sounds and techniques, here's Tell Me Baby. The third bass line I picked, also from Stadium Arcadium, is Hey. Hey is one of my favorite Chili Pepper songs. It's got a great emotional feel to it. Excellent guitar work on it as well. But just really another great example of Flea's chordal playing. He really focuses a lot in this song. Basically throughout the entire song, he plays this great looping piece on the verse. But the clip I prepared for you guys, it's actually kind of a little bit out of order because I started it on the turnaround part on the bridge, which also does the same double stop technique, but it's a different melody. But they're two great pieces. It's really just something when I'm sitting around I love to play. It's nothing too difficult, but very melodic, very pleasing to the ear. Great piece. Here it is, Hey. Moving on to 2011, at this point, Frusciante had unfortunately left the band, but we got the great and talented Josh Klinghoffer to fill his place, and he made his debut on I'm With You. Was sort of a mixed review album by fans and critics. I thought it was great. It was a new direction for the Chili Peppers for sure. They started to embrace a lot of different world music, a lot of African tribal beats and things like that, a lot of sort of Caribbean sounding stuff on some of the drums. Nonetheless, a great rhythmic album, which means it was a great bass album as well. And I picked out some special ones, actually, because of their time signatures. So the Chili Peppers aren't, a prog rock band. They typically play in 4 or 3/4 simple rhythms. But this album actually has a couple interesting time signatures on it. Perhaps thanks to Josh coming into the band and mixing things up. The first example I have here is the song Ethiopia, which Flea has this simple bass line. It's just octaves going down the neck, but basically it's a great sort of upbeat, dancey feel because it's in 7/8. So it's an interesting rhythm. It really sort of is in the pocket with the drums, and you got to get it just right, otherwise things kind of sound out of place. Interesting one. Here it is, Ethiopia.
When you give your love away, you get a feeling for. Live to love another day, even when you feel unsure. More and more I wanna raise my bar and raise
So one other interesting song on I'm With You is the song Factory of Faith. Great bass line on the verse, really sort of nice driving rhythm, funky little sort of chromatic licks in there as well. Where it really gets interesting is on the chorus. It's an interesting time signature, as I mentioned. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's 7/4 for the first three pieces of the chorus, and then 6/4 on the last part of the chorus. And you can see that in the example that the last part of the chorus is actually a little bit shorter. So it's just something interesting. It just makes for a creative, dynamic sound. And Flea has a good mix in the chorus of some good little slaps and pops and just a good rhythm continuing throughout.
Very least of it, piece of work. I was really quite a jerk. Keeping score with such a bore, busy mouth to go berserk. Now, feast on this, I was fishing for a hook. So I took a little trip and I opened up a book. I said, factually, I'm just a piece of it. Factually, the very least of it. Factually, it's just a medicine. Make you wanna cry. Why don't they let it sit? I think you're right that we should make. Tell your friends I've got a factory of faith. Last night I had a dream that it was great. Tell your friends I got a factory of faith. I got a factory of.
So, this brings us to the most recent Red Hot Chili Peppers album, The Getaway. Another sort of new sound for them. This one they hooked up with Danger Mouse. Got a little bit more of a sort of dancey feel, which of course dance means great bass as well. What genre doesn't have great bass? I'm not sure. But either way, I picked the first lead-off single off the album, which was Dark Necessities. And I picked it for a few reasons, not just because it's the single, but it has really all of these different techniques that we talked about in this episode sort of combined into one song. How convenient to end with. So in the intro, you start off almost like something with By the Way. He's playing along in beat with Chad while Josh is doing sort of more of a melodic thing. And then once the beat drops, you go into the verse where he's playing this great, intricate slap bass line with a lot of ghost notes. Takes a while to sort of get the rhythm right on that one. But really great, real catchy, real dance beat feel. And then when the chorus comes on, he goes into another sort of octave dance, sort of disco thing, sort of like what we talked about with Right on Time. He's doing like these triplets, and it's a great melodic sound. He has cool fills throughout that chorus part. So let's check out that piece, and then we'll talk a little bit about the last two parts of that song. So as you can see there, at this point in the song, there's already been quite a few different techniques used. Very dynamic, changing sound on the bass. On the next piece we're going to see here in the bridge is something that Flea does a lot. It's a pretty simple chord progression, but he does this very sort of fast-paced, descending scale. And this is something that Flea does fairly often. Another example that comes to mind is on Stadium Arcadium, the song Desecration Smile. On the bridge, he does the same thing. It's just 3 chords, but he does these great, long, extended scales where he walks down the neck. And it just makes for a more interesting sound in the background, and it works really well on this song. Really gives you a big, lush sound during the bridge. Let's check it out. And then finally, at the end of the song, we have this use of double stops again, where he comes in and just on the very last line of the song, he comes in with those roots and thirds to just bring a little bit more depth to it and really just make the ending sound really nice and melodic. Here's that last piece. So that's it, guys. Thanks so much for watching the first episode of Legends of Bass. Much more to come. Please do me a favor and subscribe at the link up here. Check out my band, 21 Kings, over here. Lots of good music. We're about to go back into the studio to record another EP. Thanks again for watching, guys. See you on the next episode of Legends of Bass.